Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, February 6, 2026. The White House removes a video shared by President Donald Trump that included images of former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama as apes after Republican and Democratic lawmakers denounced the posting as racist and offensive. Attorney General Pam Bondi announces the arrest of a suspect in the 2012 terrorist attack on the U.S. Embassy in Benghazi, Libya, that killed 4 Americans. U.S. holds indirect talks with Iran in Oman, but no major breakthroughs announced. Federal Reserve Vice Chair Philip Jefferson says he's cautiously optimistic about the 2026 economic outlook, expects growth to stay slightly above recent trends, the labor market to stabilize, and inflation heading back down to the Fed's 2% target. On Wall Street, the Dow jumps 1,000 points to close above 50,000 for the first time ever. Democrats in New Jersey call out President Trump for holding up billions of dollars for the Gateway Tunnel Transit project, reportedly because Democrats did not agree to name Penn Station in New York City and Dulles Airport in Virginia after him. Plus, former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy speaks at a Ronald Reagan 115th birthday celebration in California about Reaganomics. Vice President J.D. Vance meets with the Italian Prime Minister ahead of the Winter Olympics opening ceremony. And Maryland Senate takes an official vote on who will win Sunday's Super Bowl. That and more coming up on Washington Today. Associated Press writing President Donald Trump's social media post featuring former President Barack Obama and his wife Michelle Obama as primates in a jungle was deleted after a backlash from both Republicans and Democrats who criticized the video as racist. Nearly all of the 62-second clip, which was among dozens of Truth Social posts from Trump overnight, appears to be from a conservative video alleging deliberate tampering with voting machines in battleground states as the 2020 presidential votes were tallied. At the 60-second mark is a quick scene of 2 primates with the Obamas' smiling faces imposed on them. That was from the AP article. The White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt originally put out a statement. This is from an internet meme video depicting President Trump as the king of the jungle and Democrats as characters from The Lion King. Please stop the fake outrage and report on something today that actually matters to the American people. Senator Tim Scott, Republican of South Carolina, the only black Senate Republican, writing on X, praying it was fake because it's the most racist thing I've seen out of this White House. The president should remove it. And from Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, the minority leader, President Obama and Michelle Obama are brilliant, compassionate, and patriotic Americans. They represent the best of this country. Donald Trump is a vile, unhinged, and malignant bottom feeder. Why are GOP leaders like John Thune continuing to stand by this sick individual? Every single Republican must immediately denounce Donald Trump's disgusting bigotry. After many more similar reactions from both Republicans and Democrats, CNN's Elena Treen posting news the White House has taken down the post. A senior White House official tells me a White House staffer erroneously made the post. It has been taken down. And Treen adds it was up for 12 hours. This is Washington Today. Reuters reporting the U.S. has arrested a person suspected of playing a central role in the 2012 attack on its consulate in Benghazi, Libya, Attorney General Pam Bondi said on Friday. The attack became a symbol of the chaos in Benghazi and Libya as a whole, highlighting the instability and the presence of terrorism in the region. It led to a series of investigations in the United States in which congressional Republicans clashed with then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton ahead of her 2016 presidential run as a Democrat. That reporting from Reuters. Here is Attorney General Pam Bondi at a Justice Department news conference.
On September 11th, 2012, Americans watched horrified as our embassy in Benghazi came under a vicious terror attack. We lost 4 American lives that day. Ambassador Chris Stevens, Sean Smith with the State Department, and 2 CIA contractors, Glenn Doherty and Tyrone Woods. We have never forgotten those heroes, and we have never stopped seeking justice for that crime against our nation. In fact, from day one, Cash and Dan would sit in meetings and say, we're going to get them, and they did. Today, I'm proud to announce that the FBI has arrested one of the key participants behind the Benghazi attack. Zubair al-Bakash landed at Andrews Air Force Base at 3 a.m. this morning. He is in our custody. He was greeted by Director Patel and U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro. Hillary Clinton famously once said about Benghazi, "What difference at this point does it make?" Well, it makes a difference to Donald Trump. It makes a difference to those families. And 14 years later, it makes a difference to law enforcement who made the difference in this case. Thank you, President Trump, for supporting all of our agencies around the country and around the world. Al-Bakush will now face American justice on American soil. We will prosecute this alleged terrorist to the fullest extent of the law. He'll face charges related to murder, terrorism, arson, among others. Let this case serve as a reminder. If you commit a crime against the American people anywhere in this world, President Trump's Justice Department will find you. It might not happen overnight, but it will happen. You can run, but you cannot hide.
Attorney General Pam Bondi at the Justice Department in Washington. Joining her, the FBI Director Kash Patel, who was asked about the suspect's capture.
Tell us a little bit about how he was captured, where he was captured. Was he in jail for a while before? Was he at home? What can you tell us about how this all went down?
We're not going to give out a lot of the details, but I'm going to let Kash take what we can say.
The general's right. We have to protect the integrity of the investigation and the ongoing prosecution. That's of the utmost importance. It always is, to make sure even this individual receives the constitutional protections only afforded in the United States of America. But an FTOC, a foreign transfer of custody, is executed by the FBI each and every time with special tactical assets, FBI agents, and of course medical personnel. And that was done in this instance. And the individual was apprehended and transferred over the night and into custody early this morning at an airfield. And so that's about all we can say on that matter. But in order to maintain the chain of custody, this is what the FBI does, routine, every time. It's what we did for the 6 top 10 we already captured. It's what we did for the relentless others that we continue to capture.
Was he picked up in Libya?
He was picked up overseas.
FBI Director Kash Patel at the Justice Department news conference with the Attorney General Pam Bondi and Jeanine Pirro, U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. More from the Reuters article. 4 U.S. personnel were killed in the September 11th, 2012 incident, which was initially thought to be a spontaneous reaction to protests, but was later identified as a deliberate attack carried out by extremists, some of whom were linked to groups affiliated with al-Qaeda. Al-Bakush is the third person to face criminal charges from the attack. 2 others are serving lengthy prison terms, while another suspect was killed in an airstrike in Iraq in 2015. From the New York Post, Special Presidential Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner's 6-hour indirect talks with Iranian officials in Oman ended in frustration Friday, with Iranian officials refusing to budge on major nuclear issues or address President Trump's concerns about Tehran's ballistic missile stockpile or the regime's brutality against protesters. Iranian state-run media reported that Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi told Witkoff, Kushner, and Admiral Brad Cooper of U.S. Central Command that Tehran would not end its uranium enrichment or even move it offshore. Araghchi told Press TV, "Our talks are focused solely on the nuclear issue, and we are not engaging with the Americans on any other subject." That reporting from the New York Post. Here is some of the interview the foreign minister did with Iranian state television, translated to English through Al Jazeera.
I think I can say this is a good start, and we have to have more consultations in different capitals. And there are a sort of agreement amongst us to continue the talks and negotiations. And inshallah, we will determine the time and the place of the second round of talks during the coming days. The atmosphere was positive and it was a good start. Can we continue our interview with you at that time? I have a question regarding the phases of the talks. What phase is this? And have you spoken about the framework, or you just went into the core of the matter today? We are now in the phase that follows 8 months and after the aggressive war, and the lack of trust was there during the atmosphere, but now there is a sort of that, and we must overcome this period of distrust. Trust must be there. Trust must be available. But I can say today that the talks were positive today. We listened to our both parties' viewpoints through the Omani mediator. And if we can go along with this positive path, I can say that we can reach a positive framework regarding the nuclear talks between Iran and the USA, but I don't want to judge now at the very beginning.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi through an interpreter on Iranian state TV via Al Jazeera. C-SPAN spoke this morning with Washington Post Global Affairs columnist Ishan Tharoor about the U.S.-Iran indirect talks in Oman.
The prelude to this has been these protests that we saw in Iran last month and at the end of the last year that have been met with astonishingly awful violence by the regime. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands killed, tens of thousands certainly detained. And during that time, President Trump was cheering the protesters on. He said, help is on the way. He said the U.S. is locked and loaded. And then he hasn't really followed through. The question right now is, in terms of what we're seeing, the discussions in Oman, is that the Iranians want to go back to they're very clear. They want to talk about their nuclear program, offer some concessions on that, and get some sanctions relief, and get the U.S. to kind of dial back its pressure. The Americans have a much more uncertain position. They want to talk about everything. They want to talk about Iran's ballistic missiles, Iran's activities in the region. They really want to press the leverage they feel they have right now. And the Iranians have already said that that's not acceptable to them. So where these talks go is unclear. What we're obviously seeing in Iran itself is a regime whose legitimacy is hanging by a thread, and a supreme leader who we don't even know where he is. He's somewhere in hiding, in a safe position.
In Iran?
In Iran. And there are all sorts of potential scenarios here that, given the volatility and unpredictability of Trump's precedent behaviors, we can't really predict. And obviously, the Iranians themselves have recent experience with the Trump administration where they feel the Trump administration has been dishonest or unfair in its dealings. The big bombing campaign that Trump touted in the clip that we just heard came after the Iranians had agreed to talks, and so there is already a precedent here for the Iranians not to trust what the Americans tell them.
Washington Post Global Affairs columnist Ishan Tharoor on C-SPAN's Washington Journal program this morning before today's U.S.-Iran indirect talks in Oman. AP reporting on the negotiations. For the first time, America brought its top military commander in the Middle East to the table. The presence of U.S. Navy Admiral Brad Cooper, the head of the American military's Central Command, in his dress uniform, served as a reminder that the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln and other warships were now off the coast of Iran in the Arabian Sea. New York Times wrote on Thursday, after just 3 hours, Russia, Ukraine, and the United States declared themselves done with the latest round of peace talks, offering scant sign of progress toward ending a war that is nearing a fifth year despite the Trump administration's diplomatic interventions. A familiar pattern played out as 2 days of negotiations wrapped up in Abu Dhabi, the capital of the United Arab Emirates. Everyone said the talks were productive. More talks were planned, yet with little to show for them but an announced exchange of prisoners of war. The major sticking points in any peace deal appeared a long ways from being unstuck. That was from the New York Times. Today, the chair of the Ukrainian parliament, Ruslan Stefanchuk, spoke in Washington, D.C. at a forum on the war in Ukraine held by the Atlantic Council.
I would like to inform you that yesterday and today I had very meaningful and substantive meetings with Speaker Mike Johnson, Senators Graham and Blumenthal, the Senate Ukrainian caucus, and other officials and important figures, and we discussed a number of important questions, and it is those meetings that give me reasons to say that Ukraine is not alone. Ukraine is using the strategic, Ukraine has strategic support of the United States, and all measures will be taken to stop the Russian Federation. I cannot disclose every detail of the talks we had, but they are about serious measures which where the parliaments of our two countries will show their capability in regard of adoption of certain laws and ratification of certain agreements, and decisions there will need to be supported by the two parliaments, including on issues of transfer of certain weapon systems to Ukraine. Apart from that, I would like to say that Ukraine has never been an obstacle to reaching peace. You know that President Zelensky was saying from the very first days of the invasion, he was saying we are ready to talk about peace. He traveled to Istanbul waiting for Putin to arrive. So lengthy and durable peace is important for us. But at the same time, Ukraine has clear and understandable red lines which cannot be crossed for us, and the main ones, number one, is respect to our territorial integrity and sovereignty. Ukraine cannot and will not take any action that contradict the Constitution of Ukraine. Number two is our sovereign right to choose our own alliances, because Ukraine, that used to be a member, a component of the Soviet Union, we know very well that unions can be different kind. And this is a worldview choice for us to be a part of the civilized world. And of course, it is also not allowing to restrict our right for self-defense. Only the right for self-defense can guarantee the future for our people, for Ukraine.
Ruslan Stefanchuk, through an interpreter, the chair of the Ukrainian parliament in Washington, D.C., at a forum on the war in Ukraine held by the Atlantic Council. U.S. and Russia agreed Thursday to reestablish high-level military dialogue for the first time since it was cut off in 2021 after Russia invaded Ukraine. You're listening to Washington Today. Attorney General Pam Bondi, writes AP, said Friday she's not worried that the involvement of Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard in an FBI search of a Georgia election office could taint the FBI's investigation. Her comments came a day after President Donald Trump offered a new explanation for why Gabbard was at the main elections hub in Georgia's most populous county last week, saying Bondi had requested her presence. Again, that was from Associated Press. Attorney General Bondi was asked about this at today's Justice Department news conference.
There seems to be a little confusion with DNI Gabbard was down in Atlanta last week for the Fulton County search. Originally, this office said that she was not part of the investigation. She put in a letter to Congress that President Trump directed her to do so. And then now President Trump yesterday said that it was at your insistence that she went down there. So what is the case here?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. It's that's interesting because DNI Gabbard and I are inseparable. We are constantly together, as are the people behind us. We constantly talk. We collaborate as a cabinet. We're all extremely close, know what each other, what we're doing at all times, pretty much, to keep not only our country safe, but our world safe. And she was down there with Deputy Director Andrew Bailey of the FBI. And I'm not going to talk about any other details of that matter right now because Georgia's a very important issue to us. She was there. We're inseparable. That's all I'll say.
Attorney General Pam Bondi at a Justice Department news conference today. Senator Mark Warner, Democrat of Virginia, the Intelligence Committee vice chair, spoke to reporters on Capitol Hill on Thursday about all of this.
I think we have now 4 different explanations of why Tulsi Gabbard was engaged on a domestic criminal investigation down in Atlanta. Her initial point was that the president asked her to be there. If that's the case, then we have a return to Nixon-era policies Remember, it was Watergate where Richard Nixon put himself involved in a domestic political break-in at the Watergate. And all the rules that came after that were basically to prevent presidents from intervening early on in criminal investigations. So it begs the question, if Donald Trump told Tulsi Gabbard to go to Atlanta, then he must have known about this warrant being served before it was served, which is against all past protocols, rules. That was further manipulated by the fact that the following day, Gabbard got the president on the phone to talk to frontline FBI investigators. That is not the way our system works. Now, we see last night that it appears that the president now has changed his mind and saying he didn't know why Tulsi Gabbard was there. What the heck's going on here? You know, she is foreign intelligence, not domestic criminal investigations. And then this morning, I understand he's now said Pam Bondi begged her to be there. None of this rings true. I mean, to me, this has echoes of almost Watergate, where it appears like the beginnings of the cover-up may be worse than the crime that started. Furthermore-wise, we've also seen evidence last night that DNI Gabbard's team was looking at investigating Puerto Rican voting machines. That, again, a clear violation, and they acknowledge there is no foreign nexus, so no foreign interference. What in the hell is DNI doing investigating Puerto Rican voting machines? That's against the law. And if there was any foreign intervention in this kind of overbaked relitigation of the 2020 election, if she's not shared that information with the oversight committees, she's again violating the process. So that didn't even get into the questions about the whistleblower, but this pattern of behavior where the White House and Gabbard can't get their story straight on what was clearly a fiasco that took place in Georgia demands further investigation.
Senator, what do you think the objective was with Tulsi Gabbard, and do you think that she is trying to interfere with the 2026 midterms?
I think, unfortunately, it appears there may be a coordinated effort to try to interfere in the 26 midterms. They may even start to interfere prior to in the primaries, or in a state like mine where we may have a statewide referendum on redistricting. A year ago, I didn't believe this was possible. But this kind of action on seizing voting records, the potential of ICE trying to intimidate registered voters from showing up at polling stations in an intimidation move, the fact that this administration has dismantled much of the establishment that was put in place at the end of the first Trump term to protect our elections, the FBI Foreign Election Meddling Center, the ODNI's legally mandated Foreign Malign Influence Center shut down, cuts to cybersecurity relations to help state elections have better protections. I think we've got a president that can't get over the fact that he lost in 2020, and now in kind of a Nixonian effort is going to try to do everything he can to make sure he doesn't get another beating in 2026.
Senator Mark Warner, Democrat from Virginia, Intelligence Committee Vice Chair, speaking to reporters in Washington on Thursday. A story about a special election in New Jersey from a Gothamist, far-left congressional candidate Analilia Mejia set off a political earthquake in New Jersey last night that is reverberating around the country today. The progressive labor activist holds a narrow lead over former Congressman Tom Malinowski in the Democratic primary in the special election to fill the House seat left vacant by New Jersey's governor, Mikey Sherrill. As of Friday afternoon, Mejia was leading Malinowski by just a few hundred votes, according to the Associated Press. Her campaign, along with political experts, anticipate that it could take until next week to tabulate the outstanding votes. With the partial shutdown looming, begins an article from the Center Square. U.S. lawmakers have 8 days to broker a deal on the Department of Homeland Security's annual budget. Progress, however, remains elusive, as Republicans have already shot down Democratic leadership's all-or-nothing list of demands released Wednesday night. Democratic leaders laid out 10 changes they want added to the Homeland Security Department appropriations bill, the only fiscal year 2026 appropriations bill not yet law, which includes funding for agencies such as immigration and customs enforcement. That was from the Center Square article. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat from New York, spoke about this fight at a town hall meeting in Queens Thursday night.
Steve Bannon and some members of the administration have come out publicly kind of flirting with the idea of putting DHS outside of polling locations for the November elections. Personally, I believe that it has to be part of the DHS negotiation to prevent that and tie their hands in being able to deploy ICE agents who are killing U.S. citizens from being anywhere near a poll site this November. Point blank, period. In terms of like the strategizing, I do not know if our leadership, in terms of that for a long term, but we have to use our political power, and we have to use our political pressure. What I can say is that, frankly, the outrage last May at refusing to hold people's ground on the shutdown resonated a lot in Washington. There were a lot of moderates, especially in the Senate, that just wanted to fold right away, and they experienced a lot of backlash after that. So that it is literally people's mobilizing in May that is what gave them the spine to actually go through with a shutdown in September, demanding reversal on the ACA cuts. So just know that this is starting to work. But this upcoming fight on DHS is it. This is the moment. This is the moment. We have to send that message to love them. We have to send that message to both of our senators here in New York State. And we need to make very clear that this is there is no other bite at the apple. This is it. The funding fight and the DHS funding fight is it. Because this is something known as a CR. The next one is most likely well after November.
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat from New York, at a town hall meeting in Queens, New York, Thursday night. A Reuters reporter posting today on X, the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said Democrats will send Republicans a legislative text for DHS reforms as soon as this afternoon. A spokesperson for the Senate Majority Leader John Thune, quote, tweeting, "It's Friday at noon, still no bill text. Deadline to negotiate and process a bill is 1 week from today. An unrealistic deadline Dems demanded. It took them a week to put their growing list of demands on congressional letterhead to send to the press. GOP's fault, I'm sure." Another issue tied into this is voter ID and the push among some Republicans for the SAVE Act, that stands for Safeguard American Voter Eligibility. It would require proof of U.S. citizenship to vote. Some House Republicans want to attach the bill to the DHS funding bill. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, Republican of Florida, talked about it on the Punchbowl News Fly Out podcast on Thursday.
Can you be convinced to vote for a rule if Mike Johnson doesn't put the Save America Act in the bill? I mean, we're talking about the DHS funding. It's going to expire a week tomorrow.
Yeah, so I actually talked about this. I do think that he'll get a rule vote. And I say that because right now we have seen that the perspective of Schumer, and I think that there was just a list of 10 demands that Schumer had made with Hakeem. One of them was that, you know, ICE agents must present ID. And I was like, well, isn't that ironic? You want ICE agents to present ID, but not voters, you know? And so it's going to have to come from the Republican conference. Also, too, at the same time, though, it's not just about ICE, DHS, Homeland, all of that. I mean, we have Coast Guard. I have a massive Coast Guard unit in my district. I have a couple, actually. That gets hemmed up. TSA gets hemmed up. But I also, too, understand that right now, I mean, who would have ever thought that, you know, I'd be serving during one of the slimmest majorities in U.S. history. And yet here we are. And so we'll get through it. But remember, the president wants this. A majority of the House wants this. All of the frontline members understand how important this is. I've been talking to them. There's a lot of them. And they understand that they need Republicans to show up in the midterms and that they better get it done. The Senate also understands this. And if you don't think President Trump was sending a message by calling all these senators out to their faces in the Oval Office, and now he's hitting them hard, I think that you have something else coming.
You know, and you mentioned, I look back at the original Save Act vote, and I was surprised to see, I didn't remember, I was surprised to see that all the vulnerable Republicans did vote for it. I mean, it was a unanimous vote.
It's a wildly popular issue. Look, I have been, and I don't know if it's because it's coming from your what, but I've been pretty good on the 80-20 issues. This new parents voting and banning insider trading. It's like, if we did that, I mean, if I was in charge of the outreach for the midterms, I'd have like a winning margin by a lot.
Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, Republican of Florida, on the Punchbowl News Flyout podcast Thursday. ABC News writes that the FBI has invited elections officials around the country for a call later this month on the agency's preparations for the high-stakes midterm elections, according to a letter sent to election officials and reviewed by ABC News. The letter, which went out earlier this week, states that the FBI call will also include election officials from the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, United States Postal Inspection Service, and Election Assistance Commission. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Democracy. It isn't just an idea, it's a process shaped by leaders elected to the highest offices and entrusted to a select few with guarding its basic principles. It's where debates unfold, decisions are made, and the nation's course is charted. Democracy in real time. This is your government at work. This is C-SPAN, giving you your democracy unfiltered.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. Bloomberg News writing that Federal Reserve Vice Chair Philip Jefferson said he was cautiously optimistic about the outlook for the U.S. economy, suggesting strong productivity growth could help return inflation to the central bank's 2% target. Philip Jefferson spoke at a Brookings Institution forum on supply-side economics and inflation.
Progress on disinflation has stalled over the past year, and inflation remains elevated relative to our 2% target. Based on the most recent available data, it is estimated that the Personal Consumption Price Index rose 2.9% for the 12 months ending in December, and core prices, which exclude the volatile food and energy categories, rose 3%. Those readings are similar to the levels recorded at the end of 2024. The stall in the disinflationary process is mainly because of tariffs on some goods. Over the past year, we have seen a decline in services price inflation, mostly due to easing price pressures in housing services. But this decline has been offset by an increase in core goods price inflation. Certainly, some upside risk remain, but I expect the disinflationary process to resume this year once increased tariffs pass through more fully to prices. In addition, projected strong productivity growth may be a source of further help in bringing inflation down to our 2% target. I'll say more on this point later. After assessing the current state of the economy and reflecting my cautious optimism, I supported the FOMC's decision last week to maintain the federal funds rate at the current level. Over the past year and a half, the committee lowered the target range for the policy rate by 175 basis points. That included 3 reductions late last year. These rate cuts were responses to downside risk to employment amid somewhat reduced upside risk to inflation. Collectively, these adjustments put our policy rate broadly in the range of estimates of the neutral rate, while maintaining a balanced approach to promoting our dual mandate objectives. Our policy stance should help stabilize the labor market while allowing inflation to resume its decline towards our 2% target.
Federal Reserve Vice Chair Philip Jefferson today at the Brookings Institution. On Wall Street, the Dow up 1,206 to close at 50,115. First time above 50,000. NASDAQ up 490, S&P up 133. The White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett was on Fox Business today talking about the Dow hitting 50K for the first time.
The market was very nervous earlier in the week because the market didn't understand something that Art Laffer and Larry Kudlow have been teaching us forever, which is when there's a productivity boom, like we're seeing because of artificial intelligence, that everybody's better off. That's where prosperity comes from. If you go back to the dawn of the pre-industrial age, right, it was the introduction of new inventions and so on that built our wealth over time. And right now we're in the midst of a productivity boom unlike anything we've ever seen, and it's being fed by great policies. We've got a big, beautiful bill that's making it so that the people get to expense when they build these AI centers. And when all the capital spending comes in, it's up 6.5% since the big, beautiful bill, then that makes everybody's wage go up. And one of the things I can remember a few months ago, every time I came on TV, people said, oh, but the people aren't feeling it. And I've said, and you taught me to say this, people will feel it when they see it in their wallets. And guess what happens in January? That's when people often get their annual salary adjustment. And all of a sudden, the consumer, even the Democrats of the Michigan survey are celebrating because they're seeing it in their own wallets. And so the people are seeing it in their paychecks. We're seeing it in the surveys because now they see, oh, gosh, look at all the extra money I got in my paycheck. And we're seeing it in equity markets. And so it really is a kind of golden age. Final thought, we're now seeing GDP down. GDP now down a little bit from the 5 to 4.5. But if we get that, then that means we had a 3% year. And the IMF forecasted we'd have a 1.5% year. And so we've doubled the expectation of, the IMF, the big forecaster. And we did that even though Joe Biden had one quarter. And so this is what Trump's economy looks like.
Kevin Hassett, director of the National Economic Council at the White House, today on the Fox Business Channel. CBS News writing that New Jersey officials and union workers are calling for the Trump administration to resume federal funding of the critical Gateway Tunnel project. Construction is set to stop at 5 p.m. Friday. Work on the aging tunnel in New York and New Jersey will be suspended after the money for the $16 billion infrastructure project ran out. Officials said 1,000 workers are facing layoffs. President Trump abruptly froze federal funding for the project back in October. His administration is now facing a lawsuit to free up the funding already approved by Congress. That was from CBS News. Senator Cory Booker, Democrat of New Jersey, was one of the speakers at the news conference today at the construction site in Weehawken, New Jersey.
Today is a day that should outrage every New Jerseyan, frankly, everyone in this region. We have a president who is literally holding one of the most important infrastructure projects of the last century hostage because of his would-be, wannabe, king, petty, personal, vindictive, cruel policies. Look around us right now. We've got some of the hardest working people in the tri-state area who are now having their jobs sabotaged, having a project undermined by this petty vindictiveness of a president who seems to want his name on everything but doesn't give a damn about the working people of New Jersey and the commuters of our region who are depending on this project. What he's doing right now by holding this project hostage is elevating project costs, putting over 1,000 people out of work immediately, threatening over 90,000 future jobs, and undermining the daily commute of hundreds of thousands of Americans who continue to be frustrated by the infrastructure of this region. This Gateway Tunnel project is absolutely a necessary investment, one that will guarantee that our transit arteries flow smoothly, one that will ensure the safety of the region's tens of millions of people who rely on transportation in this area. This project is a stretch of train that isn't just vital for New York and New Jersey, it is vital for the entire northeastern corridor, the busiest rail stretch in all of North America. This is all being put on the line now by a president that seems to just want things named after him.
Senator Cory Booker, Democrat from New Jersey, at a news conference with other New Jersey officials, all wearing hard hats and safety vests at the tunnel project construction site in Weehawken, New Jersey. He referred to Donald Trump and things named after him. First reported by Punchbowl News Thursday night that President Donald Trump offered to release the funding for the massive Gateway infrastructure project if Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer agrees to support renaming both Washington Dulles International Airport and New York's Penn Station after Trump. This is C-SPAN Radio's Washington Today. It was on this date in 1998 that Washington National Airport was renamed Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, honoring the former president on his 87th birthday. Today, on what would have been Ronald Reagan's 115th birthday, the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California, held a commemoration. One of the speakers, former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican from California. He talked about Reagan's domestic and foreign policy. Here he is on Reaganomics.
One of the most lasting policy changes of the Reagan years were Reaganomics. When Reagan took office, inflation was at 13%, interest rates hitting 20%, and unemployment was high. People had lost faith. In response, Reagan cut taxes. He slashed regulation. He unleashed free enterprise, and he made it easier for Americans to save and start a family. He did all this in less than 2 years. What were the results? Inflation declined. Incomes rose across every demographic. America saw one of the longest peacetime expansions in American history. In short, it was morning in America again. In January 1984, as the recovery took hold, Reagan said, "Progress begins when trusting people." Reagan believed ordinary people were capable of extraordinary things. He never forgot that the American people, not the government, are the ultimate engines of growth. Today, polls show that Americans, particularly younger Americans, prefer socialism to free enterprise. Now, we could dismiss this as the ignorance of youth. While that may be true, that would be a mistake on our part. Young Americans face challenges today that would test anyone's faith in the system. For one, let's look at housing. A typical home during Reagan's presidency cost 3 times the average salary, and that was with 20% interest rates. Today, it costs 5 times the average annual salary of a working family. Young people today work hard, play by the rules, but still can't afford to start a family. That's not sustainable. But here's what Reagan would tell us. Free markets are not the problem. Market distortions from the government are. So let's apply those principles today. On housing, punishing regulations have created a bottleneck for building new homes. In California, I'm not quite sure President Reagan would recognize it today. The governance has been different than when he and Governor Wilson were governor. You wouldn't pay twice the price for gas in California as you would in another state. You wouldn't leave, the population wouldn't shrink in California, it would grow. Reagan deregulated energy and transportation. We need to deregulate housing so young families can afford homes in California again.
Former U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican from California, at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California, on Ronald Reagan's 115th birthday, part of C-SPAN's American History TV coverage. You can find the video at cspan.org. Associated Press from Milan, Italy, writing that Vice President J.D. Vance met Friday with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, one of the Trump administration's closest allies in Europe, during his trip to Italy for the Olympic Games. Vance is on a week-long visit that combines sports and diplomacy, meeting with Meloni at a time when U.S. relations with Europe have become increasingly strained under President Donald Trump, who has shaken up the rules-based order that has been at the center of U.S. foreign policy since World War II. And that's the article from AP. The two leaders spoke briefly to the press, and we pick it up after the Prime Minister switches to English after she had been speaking in Italian for a minute.
I know you didn't. You didn't know what I was talking about. I was saying that
I've actually learned Italian since the last time I saw you.
I said nothing particular. I was saying that I'm happy to have you here, to have the occasion to talk about our wonderful bilateral relation, but also about many international topics which are open. And I was reminding that last time I saw you in Rome, it was for the new Pope.
That's right.
And today we meet again for the Olympic Games. It is two events that tell about values that keep together Italy and the US, Europe and the US, the Western civilization, and it's mainly the reason why we like to work together.
A great ambassador.
Good morning, Ambassador. Welcome. How are you, gentlemen?
It's hard to get around.
Okay, well, Prime Minister Maloney, it's so good to see you and your team, and great to be back in your beautiful country. We love Italy, we love the Italian people, and as you said, we have a lot of great relationships, we have a lot of great economic connections and partnerships, and I think it's you guys have done an amazing job with the Olympic Games. The city looks beautiful. My wife and I have been excited to attend the Olympics in Milan for pretty much since I became vice president. We've talked about this and wanting to do this, and so very glad that it worked out. I'm very glad that you guys have done such a good job. So in the spirit of the Olympics, friendship, competition, but competition based on rules, and just coming together around shared values. We're very, very thrilled to be here, and we'll have a great conversation about a number of topics. So thank you all.
Mr. Vice President, can you provide an update on the talks in Oman? Mr. Secretary, can you provide an update on the Iran talks? Is the goal to...
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you.
A meeting between Vice President J.D. Vance and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni in Milan. Also in the room, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Vance and his family earlier in the day watched the opening session of the Olympics team figure skating competition. From a CBS News article, more than 2,900 athletes from 92 national Olympic committees will compete at the Milano Cortina Winter Olympic Games. The United States will have the largest presence with more than 230 athletes, followed by Canada with 210 athletes, and host nation Italy with 196. The president of the International Olympic Committee, Kirsty Coventry, posted a video expressing that the Olympic Games can play an important role when it comes to kindness, respect, and the way we treat each other.
I think the Olympic Games are an incredibly powerful platform to showcase not just incredible sporting moments, but incredible pieces of reminders of how we should behave as humans and what that should look like. And sometimes, you know, I think sometimes the strongest messages are sometimes the simplest messages, right? Like, how do we be kind to each other? How do we treat each other? How can we be respectful of each other? That doesn't mean that we will always agree, but how can we do it in a manner that just allows for there to be better understanding? That I think is what makes this platform really special, and we get to witness that and see that at just about every single event across the Olympic movement. I think the best picture that I can paint of why the village is so special is in the dining hall. At the end of a day, or the first thing in the morning, lunchtime, generally dinner time was always the busiest time at a certain time, especially in summer sports. Because you would walk in and you walk into just this array of color, and every country is represented and everyone's just found a seat and all mixed, right? And so yes, you may have your team sports that sort of sit together, but then right next to them are all the other teams that they just competed with. And that for me is just extremely special, extremely unique, and in today's world, an extremely important message, picture to show and to share with the world.
International Olympic Committee President Kirsty Coventry in a video. The opening ceremony for the Milano Cortina Winter Olympics in Italy is tonight. The National Football League's Super Bowl 60 is Sunday, and the Trump administration is planning to promote one of its initiatives with a 30-second ad from a nonprofit advocacy organization to what is usually the largest viewing audience of the year for any single event. The issue is Trump accounts, the investment plan that they say will help families save money for their children starting at birth with a government contribution. The Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent mentioned the ad while testifying Wednesday before the House Financial Services Committee.
The uptake is going quite well. We had a big event this week to roll out the accounts. More than 1 million households representing more than 1 million children have signed up. I would tell everyone to look for the commercial right after the national anthem at the Super Bowl this weekend. I think we are prepared for a flood of signups, and then they will go live on July 5th.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent testifying before a House committee Wednesday. This is the ad they plan to run during the Super Bowl.
Dear America.
If I start investing when I'm 16?
9, 7. It could change my future. All our future. I want to be a nurse.
Go to college.
Be a businesswoman. I can save for a house with a trampoline. 2 trampolines. This year, every American child gets an investment account. And millions will be pre-funded. That's free money. We can all expand the American dream. Sign me up.
That ad from Invest America, a nonprofit set to run during Super Bowl 60 on Sunday. Before an estimated 100 million viewers watching the game, and ads can cost up to $10 million for 30 seconds this year. Boston 25 News writing that Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey and Washington State Governor Bob Ferguson have placed a friendly wager ahead of Super Bowl 60, which features a matchup between the New England Patriots and the Seattle Seahawks. If the Patriots win, Massachusetts plans to send a taste of the Commonwealth, including Legal Seafood's famous New England clam chowder, 2 live Maine lobsters, a curated selection of East Coast oysters, classic lobster rolls, and Dunkin' coffee. Washington's offering would include shellfish and coffee from the Pacific Northwest. That was from Boston 25 News. And just for fun, Maryland's state Senate took a vote on Thursday on who will win this year's Super Bowl. It was on the Senate floor in Annapolis using the official electronic voting machinery with the results displayed on the tally board. Maryland State Senate Bill Ferguson presided.
We do have an important vote tally before we do announcements, so that we can do. We are going to have we're also going to have a recognition for Black History Month. But before we get there to the serious stuff, we have one less serious item. A big game. This I forgot to give the Secretary's office a heads up on this. It's going to be a Seahawks versus Patriots question coming. That for those who care to be watching, no Ravens, no Commanders. Thank God, no Steelers. To our chair of Triple E, So what we're going to do here, folks, is, as a matter of record, is a green vote is for the Seahawks. A red vote is for those Patriots. So there's only one right answer here. Only one right answer. Green for the Seahawks, red for the Patriots. We'll keep this record printed out, see who's correct. It might be a prize on Monday. We'll see. We'll see. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Appreciate the, very good, yes, it appears so. Yes, Senator from Baltimore City and County.
Mr. President, to explain my vote, my wife is from Boston area. I'd like to be able to go home this weekend.
Duly noted, duly noted, well said. All right, the clerk will take the call. It appears by a vote of 28 for the Seahawks and 8 for the Patriots, with 7 who just don't care and are watching the commercials. The Seahawks are going to win. So, all right, we've got that.
Maryland State Senate President Bill Ferguson, a Democrat, during Thursday's Senate session in Annapolis, Maryland. And you heard Senator Mary Washington, a Democrat, explaining her vote. Thank you for listening to Washington Today. Remember, tonight, a new C-SPAN Ceasefire airs at 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern. Host Dasha Burns is joined by Chad Wolf, former acting Secretary of Homeland Security during the first Trump administration, and John Sandweg, former acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, during the Obama administration, for a bipartisan conversation on the future of immigration enforcement in the United States. C-SPAN's Ceasefire tonight at 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern. Hope you have a good night and weekend.